Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to read you a little bit more of Ratburger. We are up to chapter 20, which is Tug of War. Of course, Zoe had always known that the bully lived somewhere in her block of flats. Her gang permanently occupied the adventure playground. What's more, every day Tina spat on Zoe's head from a stairwell, but Zoe had no idea the horrible girl lived this close. Then Zoe had a thought that made her feel confused. This meant it was Tina's family who shouted at each other and slammed doors more than even her own. It was Tina who got screamed at by her dad, and whom Zoe had felt sorry for as she lay trying to get to sleep at night. Zoe shook her head to get rid of this strange new sensation of feeling sorry for Tina Trotz. Then she reminded herself of another sensation, flob on her face, and she stopped. It was now mid-morning. Zoe had been scratching away at the wall all through the night. On the other side of the hole was Tina's big, ugly face, snoring. She was lying on her bed, which, as if in a mirror image, was placed in exactly the same place as Zoe's was in her room. The room was bare of possessions, though. It looked more like a prison cell than a girl's bedroom. Tina was wrapped up in her grubby duvet. For a young girl, she snored like a camel, loud and low, and her lips wobbled when she exhaled. If you've ever wondered what a snoring camel sounds like, it goes something like this. It was a school day and Tina should be in lessons by now, but Zoe knew that most days she bunked off, and when she didn't, she came and went as she pleased. Now Zoe was face to face with her worst enemy. Yet there was no turning back. Everything in Zoe's room was covered in a thick dust as a result of her excavations. As soon as her stepmother unlocked the door to come in to check up on her, it would be game over, and she would never, ever see Armitage again. Right now, though, Tina's big scary face was right on the other side of the hole. Zoe peered at the bully's surprisingly thick nostril hair, wondering what on earth to do next. Suddenly Zoe thought of a plan. If only she could grab a corner of Tina's duvet, she could tug it sharply through the hole. Then, as Tina rolled onto the floor, Zoe could climb through the hole, jump over her, and bolt out through Tina's flat to safety. It now occurred to her that she should revise the chance of death for the digging plan to high. At that moment, she heard her stepmother's footsteps thundering down the corridor. Zoe had to act, and fast. She reached her hand through the hole, took a deep breath, and tugged as hard as she could on the duvet, which was rather greasy to the touch. It was as if it had never been washed. The yank was hard enough to send Tina rolling onto the floor. Thud, thud, thud. Just as Zoe heard the key turning in her bedroom door, she clambered through the hole. Unlike a rat, though, Zoe didn't have whiskers, and even though she was an unusually small girl, she had rather underestimated her size. When her body was halfway through the hole, she became completely and utterly stuck. Try as she might to wriggle, she could not move an inch. Tina had now, of course, woken up, and it would be an understatement to say she did not look in a good mood. She was angrier than a great white shark that had been called a rude name. The bully rose slowly to her feet, looked at Zoe, and started pulling violently at the small girl's arms, doubtless so she could get her whole body through to her room and beat her up more thoroughly. "I am going to get you, you little runt," she growled. "Oh, good morning, Tina," said Zoe, her tone imploring a non-violent response to this unusual situation. Meanwhile, no doubt hearing all the commotion, Sheila had rushed into the bedroom behind her and grabbed hold of her stepdaughter's legs. The odious woman was pulling as hard as she could on them. "Come here, when I get me hands on you," screamed the big lady. "Good morning, stepmother," called Zoe over her shoulder. Again, the chirpy tone did nothing to pacify the woman holding on to her ankles. Soon Zoe was buffeting back and forward through the hole. "Ooh!" she cried as she was pulled one way. "Ah!" she cried as she was pulled the other. Soon it was like she was singing a rather repetitive pop song. "Ooh ah, ooh ah, ooh ah, ooh ah, ooh ah, ooh ah." Backward, forward, backward, forward. Soon after that, the walls started crumbling around her as she was yanked back and forth. Tina was strong, but Zoe's stepmother had weight on her side. It was a surprisingly even tug of war, which as a result felt like it would never end. Both were pulling so hard on Zoe's limbs that as she screamed, she was aware of one positive to the situation. Whoever won, Zoe would at least be taller by the end of it. She felt like a particularly prized Christmas cracker. However, just like a Christmas cracker, she was sure to explode. Larger bits of plaster were now crumbling off the wall and dropping onto her head. There we go. Who do you think is going to win? "Ah!" cried Zoe. A massive crack blasted across the wall. Crack! All of a sudden, Zoe could feel the whole wall giving way. Soon it all came crashing down to the floor in a blizzard of dust. Boom! The noise was deafening, and soon all Zoe could see was white. It looked a bit like this. There we go, big puff of white. Chapter 21, Sizzling Bottom. It was as if there had been an earthquake, but at least Zoe's arms and legs were now free. Somewhere in the dust cloud, in her now shared bedroom she could hear Tina and her stepmother coughing. Zoe knew she now had a split second to make her escape and rushed forward. Unable to see anything, she used her hands to desperately find a door handle. Zoe opened the door and hurled herself into the corridor. Completely disorientated by the explosion of dust, it was only now she realised she was running through Tina's flat. It was even grottier than Zoe's. There was no furniture or carpet to speak of. The wallpaper was peeling off the walls, and there was a smell of damp everywhere. It was as if they were living like squatters in their own flat. However, this was no time for a makeover, even a 15-minute one like on TV, and after a few moments, Zoe found the front door. Her little heart beating faster than ever before, she tried desperately to unlock it. Her hands were trembling, and she was unable to turn the bolt. Then, out of the dust cloud behind her, stumbled two monstrous ghostly figures, huge and looming, all white, but with open, screaming mouths and eyes bulging out red in fury. It was like something out of a horror film. "Ah!" screamed Zoe. Here they come. Then she realised it was Tina and her stepmother, both covered head to toe in white dust. "Ah!" screamed Zoe. "Come here!" shouted Sheila. "I am going to get you!" bellowed Tina. Zoe's hands shook even more, and she just managed to open the door in time. As Zoe slid out, 4 chubby hands caked in white dust grabbed at her clothes, ripping strips off her blazer. Somehow Zoe managed to slip away and slam the door behind her. Running down the communal corridor, Zoe realised that both ways out of the great leaning tower block, the stairs and the lift, were sure to result in capture. Then Zoe remembered there was scaffolding on the far side of the flats. Thinking there might be a way down somehow, she raced over. She opened a window and climbed out onto the scaffold before closing the window behind her. A wicked wind shook the thin boards beneath her feet. She looked down. 37 floors. Even the buses on the street looked tiny, like little toys. Zoe's head spun. This was beginning to seem like a terrible idea. But behind her, Tina and Sheila's fewer faces were pressed up against the glass, and they were banging on the window. Without thinking, Zoe ran along the outside of the building as her stepmother and Tina fought to be first out onto the scaffold to give chase. At the end of the wooden walkway, there was a large plastic tube that went all the way down 37 floors to a skip. Zoe had thought it looked like a water slide, though it was designed to pass all the unwanted bits of debris from the building repairs down to the ground safely. It was just big enough for a little girl. Turning round, Zoe saw Tina and her stepmother a few paces behind her. She took a deep breath and leapt into the tube. Red plastic surrounded her, and she slid faster than she could have imagined, screaming as she went. Down, down, down. Would it never come to an end? Down and down she swirled, travelling faster and faster as she neared the ground. The little girl had never been on a water slide, and for a moment the sensation of travelling so fast on her bottom was fun. As there was no water, though, her bottom became hotter and hotter as it rubbed against the plastic. Then, without warning, the ride finished and the little girl flew out of the tube into the skip. Fortunately, there was an old mattress someone had illegally dumped in there, and it cushioned her fall. Her sizzling bottom now cooling, Zoe looked up at the scaffold. She could see her oversized stepmother stuck in the mouth of the tube, with Tina vigorously trying to push her down by putting all her weight on the woman's huge bum. Push and push as she might, Sheila's body just wouldn't fit. Zoe couldn't help but smile. She was safe, for the moment at least. But she knew someone she loved was in the most terrible danger. If she didn't find Armitage fast, he would be pulverized. And there we go. There's a picture of Tina trying to push Sheila down that tube. I hope you've enjoyed those chapters, and I'll read you a couple more soon. Bye.